Hello and welcome. I am Pranay Upadhyay and you are watching Namaste World, your daily window into the biggest stories shaping India and the world. We begin in South Asia. Shaksgam Valley returns to spotlight as India rejects China-Pakistan claims. Army Chief General Upinder Dwivedi calls 1963 deal illegal. In East Asia, Iran faces its most dangerous uprising in decades as economic collapse and political anger threatens to upend the Islamic Republic. Global powers are watching Pakistan's nuclear arsenal amid fears its deadly secrets could be sold rather than fired. Back in America, US threats of 25% tariff on Iran trade to have minimal impact on India as Iran accounts of just 0.15% of India's total trade. But the biggest news of the day, outrage erupted in London as Sikh community rescued a teenage girl from an alleged grooming gang amid police inaction. All that and more. Global flashpoints, power plays and stories that matter coming up in this edition of Namaste World. So stay tuned. In a dramatic turn of events in West London's Hounslow area, more than 200 members of the Sikh community rallied together to rescue a teenage Sikh girl from an alleged abduction and sexual exploitation by infamous Pakistani grooming gangs in UK. According to multiple reports, the 15-year-old girl was groomed over years, starting from around age 13 by a man in his 30s or maybe early 40s and reportedly of Pakistani origin. Sikh community is also outraged over inaction of local police authorities who were reportedly informed but took no immediate action. This prompted the community to gather outside the suspect's flat. After hours of tense protest and demonstrations, the teenager was safely reunited with her family and the accused was taken into custody. This incident has reignited national concern over grooming gangs amid the ongoing government inquiry announced by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The Sikh community continues to highlight the vulnerability of young girls to such predatory tactics. A year after India and China disengaged troops in eastern Ladakh, a fresh dispute has erupted, not on the ground, but on the map. The flashpoint in Shaksgam Valley, a remote region involving India, China and Pakistan. So why is this valley suddenly back in spotlight and what is the illegal 1963 agreement between Pakistan and China? Here is a report by Jyoti Shukla.
A year after India and China disengaged troops in eastern Ladakh, a new fault line has opened up, not on the battlefield, but on the map. The flashpoint is Shaksgam Valley, a remote but highly strategic region in Jammu and Kashmir that is now at the center of a sharp India-China exchange, with Pakistan playing a key role. So why is Shaksgam Valley suddenly back in the spotlight? Shaksgam Valley, also known as the Trans-Karakoram Tract, lies high in the Karakoram Mountains, north of the Siachen Glacier. It borders China's Xinjiang region and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. For India, this area is crucial. Siachen allows India to monitor Pakistan's military movements, while nearby passes help keep track of Chinese activity in the region. The roots of the dispute go back to 1947, when Jammu and Kashmir acceded to India in October that year. Shaksgam Valley legally became part of Indian territory. However, Pakistan later occupied parts of the region, and in the early 1960s, China began moving into areas east of Hunza, despite India raising objections. In 1963, Pakistan signed the China-Pakistan Boundary Agreement, under which it ceded nearby 5,000 square kilometers of the Shaksgam Valley to China. India has consistently rejected this deal, arguing that Pakistan had no legal right to hand over Indian territory. New Delhi's position remains unchanged. On January 9, India firmly reiterated that Shaksgam Valley is Indian territory.
Shaksgam Valley is Indian territory. We have never recognized the so-called China-Pakistan boundary agreement that happened in 1963. We have consistently maintained that the agreement is illegal and invalid.
He added that India also does not recognize the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, as it passes through Indian territory under Pakistan's illegal occupation. Jaiswal said India has repeatedly protested attempts to alter the ground reality in Shaksgam Valley and reserves the right to take necessary measures to safeguard the interests. The issue has gained urgency because of China's recent infrastructure push. Reports suggest China has completed a 75-kilometer all-weather road through the valley, strengthening access towards Pakistan-controlled areas and linking it to the CPEC. China, however, has rejected India's objections outright.
Are part of China's territory, and China's infrastructure activities in its own territory is beyond reproach. China and Pakistan have signed border agreements and determined the border between the two countries since the 1960s. These are rights of China and Pakistan as sovereign states.
India doubled down the very next day. Army Chief General Upendra Dwivedi reiterated that the 1963 agreement is illegal and that India does not accept any joint actions.
India considers 1963 agreement between Pakistan and China as illegal. Therefore, the joint statement which has been issued in China, what I understand about the CPEC 2.0, we do not accept it and we consider that it is an illegal action which is being carried out by the two nations.
At its core, the Shaksgam Valley dispute is not just about history. It's about sovereignty, strategic control, and a three-way contest that continues to shape the geopolitics of the Himalayas. With Jyoti Shukla, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
As Iran faces its most dangerous unrest in decades, economic collapse and mass protests are colliding with a century of unfinished revolutions, foreign interference and authoritarian rule, pushing the Islamic Republic to a historic breaking point as Iranians demand not just new leader but a new system. Is this the movement Iran finally changed? Here is a report by Farhan Khan.
Iran's streets are once again at the center of history. As 2026 begins, mass protests triggered by economic collapse have grown into the most serious challenge the Islamic Republic has ever faced. To understand why this moment feels so explosive, you have to zoom out and trace how Iran has lived through repeated cycles of reform, repression, revolution, and regime change for more than a century. This story begins in the early 1900s. At the turn of the 20th century, Iran was caught in two battles at once. Externally, Britain and Russia treated it as a pawn in their imperial great game, carving the country into spheres of influence. Internally, Iranians were demanding limits on royal power. In 1905, protests over sugar prices sparked what became the Constitutional Revolution. By 1906, Iran had its first parliament and constitution, a radical moment for the region. But the experiment didn't last. Foreign interference, internal divisions, and military pressure crushed the constitutional movement by 1911. The constitution survived on paper, but democracy did not. Out of this chaos emerged a strong man. In 1921, Reza Khan, a military officer, marched into Tehran. By 1925, he had ended the Qajar dynasty and crowned himself Reza Shah, founding the Pahlavi monarchy. His rule focused on centralization, nationalism, and rapid modernization, railways, schools, universities, and a secular legal system. But political freedom was sacrificed. Iran was modernizing, but from the top down. World War II reshaped Iran again. In 1941, Allied forces forced Reza Shah to abdicate over fears he was too close to Nazi Germany. His son, Mohammad Reza Shah, took the throne. The young Shah faced immediate challenges. In the early 1950s, Iran briefly returned to democratic politics under Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, who nationalized Iran's oil industry. That moment ended abruptly in 1953 when a CIA and MI6 backed coup removed Mossadegh and restored the Shah's authority. For many Iranians, this became a defining trauma, proof that foreign powers would block Iranian democracy if it threatened their interests. The Shah ruled for another 25 years. His White Revolution in the 1960s introduced land reform, women's voting rights, and literacy programs. Iran grew richer during the oil boom of the 1970s, but inequality widened, dissent was crushed, and the secret police silenced opposition. Economic modernization raced ahead, political legitimacy lagged behind. By 1978, the system collapsed. Protests swept the country. In January 1979, the Shah fled. A month later, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned from exile. The Islamic Revolution replaced monarchy with clerical rule, promising justice, independence, and dignity. But the Islamic Republic soon hardened into another authoritarian system. Over 4 decades, the regime built powerful security forces, crushed reform movements, and expanded its influence across West Asia. Yet unrest never disappeared. Each wave of protests in 1999, 2009, 2017, 2019, and the Women Life Freedom movement of 2022 chipped away at its authority. Ordinary Iranians increasingly ignored state controls, from dress codes to censorship. Now, in 2026, Iran stands at another turning point. The economy is collapsing, the currency has cratered, and thousands have been killed or detained as the protests spread nationwide. At the same time, the regime is weaker than ever. Its regional allies are diminished, its military infrastructure damaged, and its aging supreme leader faces an uncertain succession. History shows a pattern. Iran repeatedly experiments with change, only to see it derailed by foreign intervention, elite power struggles, or repression from within. Each regime promises renewal. Each eventually loses legitimacy. What makes this moment different is that many Iranians are no longer asking who should rule next, but what kind of system should exist at all. After more than a century of revolutions and reversals, Iran's future once again hangs in the balance, somewhere between the unthinkable and the inevitable. With Farhan Khan, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
As fears grow over Pakistan's nuclear arsenal, analysts warn the real danger may not be war with India, but the possibility of nuclear secrets being sold amid economic and political pressure. Rising alarms in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Gulf capitals alike as global powers watch Islamabad closely. Will Pakistan's nukes remain secure? Here's a report by Sharik Saha.
The global spotlight is once again turning towards Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. And this time, the concern is not just about India. Across diplomatic and intelligence circles, a growing fear is taking shape. What if nuclear technology falls into the wrong hands? Not through war, but through money. According to senior Pakistani journalist and political analyst Najm Sethi, Pakistan's nuclear weapons are designed for one reason and one reason only: to deter India. He says Islamabad cannot match India in conventional military power, making nuclear weapons the country's ultimate shield of survival. Sethi explains that Pakistan's nuclear program was never meant to be an Islamic bomb, nor a threat to Israel or the United States. But that hasn't stopped global powers from watching closely. Why? Because the real anxiety, he says, is not about Pakistan firing a nuclear weapon. It is about Pakistan possibly selling nuclear technology. Wealthy Muslim nations, particularly in the Gulf, have the financial power to seek nuclear capability. And the fear in Western capitals is that economic pressure or political instability could tempt Pakistan into sharing nuclear know-how. This is where Israel enters the picture. Sethi says Israel has long opposed any Islamic nation possessing nuclear weapons and has kept Pakistan under constant surveillance. With unrest in Iran and shifting Middle East dynamics, pressure on Islamabad is expected to grow even stronger. Pakistan, meanwhile, has refused to sign a no-first-use nuclear agreement, something India and global powers have repeatedly pushed for. CT says Islamabad sees such a commitment as dangerous, given India's conventional military superiority. In short, Pakistan views its nuclear weapons not as tools of aggression, but as weapons of survival. Yet, the world sees something else. A fragile state with nuclear secrets that could reshape the balance of power if they ever fell into the wrong hands. And that is why Pakistan's nuclear future remains one of the most closely watched and feared stories on the global stage. With Shaurik Shah, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
US President Donald Trump has announced a fresh tariff threat targeting countries that trade with Iran, sending shockwaves across global markets. India is among those watching closely. But how much of India's trade is actually at risk, and should exporters be worried? Here is a report by Jyoti Shukla.
US President Donald Trump has once again rattled global trade with a sweeping announcement. A 25% tariff on any country doing business with Iran. Framed as a pressure tactic against Tehran, the move has sparked concern across capitals, including New Delhi. The announcement has also drawn a sharp response from China, Iran's biggest trading partner. Beijing has warned that tariff wars help no one and says it will defend its economic interests.
China's position on tariffs is very clear. There are no winners in a tariff war. China will firmly safeguard its legitimate rights and interests.
But how serious is the impact on India? At first glance, the numbers look worrying. India exported goods worth $1.24 billion to Iran in financial year 2025, and Trump's blanket tariff threat puts that trade under scrutiny. The most exposed sector by value is rice, which alone accounted for over $757 million, or more than 61% of India's exports to Iran. However, here's where the picture becomes more nuanced. India's trade with Iran is already tightly constrained by US Treasury rules enforced by the Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC. Imports from Iran, mainly organic chemicals and dry fruits like dates and pistachios, have already declined sharply, leaving India with a healthy trade surplus. Trump's Iran-related duties could push overall tariffs even higher, potentially up to 75%, at a moment when New Delhi and Washington are still negotiating tariff relief. For now, India may avoid immediate damage, but Trump's latest move once again highlights how unilateral trade threats announced via social media continue to destabilize global commerce, even when the economic fallout is far from clear. With Jyoti Shukla, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
As we wrap up today's show, here's a quick look at the top stories making waves around the world. A devastating train disaster in northeastern Thailand has left at least 25 people dead after a construction crane collapsed onto moving passenger coaches. Iran is spiraling deeper into chaos as protests death near 2,600 and Donald Trump signals possible US intervention, rattling the entire West Asia region. Top White House envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are planning a possible Moscow visit to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin amid rising global geopolitical tensions. And that brings us to the end of today's edition of Namaste World. From breakthrough in technology and business to political developments and natural disasters. Stay tuned as we bring you the latest updates, key developments and more from New Delhi to New York. See you again tomorrow, same time, right here on Namaste World.